The opulent halls of the stellar spire, the tallest residence on the planet of Sirius Prime, were a monument to cold beauty. Light refracted through crystalline walls, casting rainbows on floors of polished nebula-veined marble. In the center of it all, Alara, sole heir to the Venetrix corporate empire, stood before a panoramic window, her silhouette a picture of impatient grace. She didn't turn as the head of security. A stern man named Silas cleared his throat. "The new head of your personal security detail has arrived, Miss Venetrix," Silas announced, his voice echoing in the vast room. Elara finally turned, her eyes, the color of polished amethyst, sweeping over the man standing beside Silas, her perfectly sculpted brow furrowed slightly. This was her new shadow. He was disappointingly ordinary. He stood of average height, with a build that was lean rather than bulky, clad in a simple, dark suit that lacked any ostentation. His hair was the color of dark earth, his features pleasant but unremarkable. He looked more like a junior data analyst than a personal protector. "This is him?" she asked, her voice a blend of frost and disbelief. "You're replacing Bronson with..." This the man didn't flinch. His posture remained relaxed, yet alert. His eyes, a calm and steady shade of hazel, met hers without submission or challenge. He simply observed, "Kellen is one of our most highly recommended operatives, Miss Venetrix," Silas said, a note of defensiveness in his tone. "His record is impeccable, impeccable." Alara let out a short, humorless laugh. She walked a slow circle around Kellen, who remained still as a statue. "He doesn't look like he could intimidate a lost servo drone. They called him the Adorable Bodyguard at his last post, you know. I thought it was a joke." She stopped in front of him again, crossing her arms. "You're too tiny to be my bodyguard. You do know that, don't you? You're practically a collectible." For the first time, he spoke. His voice was quieter than she expected, but it carried a core of unshakable calm. "My size has rarely been a disadvantage, Miss Venetrix. It encourages underestimation, does it now?" she retorted, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, consider me thoroughly unimpressed. Your job is to be a visible deterrent. You're meant to look the part. You look like you should be fetching my coffee. I can do that as well, if it's required," he replied, his tone utterly serious. Lara rolled her eyes and waved a dismissive hand. "Fine, whatever, just stay out of my way. And for star's sake, try to look a little more formidable." "Silas, I have a comm call with the board of directors on Alpha Centauri in 10 minutes. See that I'm not disturbed." She turned her back on them both, a clear dismissal. She heard Silas murmur a few low words to Kellen before his footsteps receded. She expected Kellen to take up a position by the door, a silent, stoic statue like Bronson had been. Instead, after a moment, she felt a presence just behind her right shoulder. "If you're going to stand there, you could at least breathe quietly," she snapped without turning around. "I'll do my best," came the quiet reply. The next few days fell into a tedious pattern. Kellen was, as instructed, never in the way, but he was always there, a shadow in a well-tailored suit. He was preternaturally observant, his eyes constantly scanning rooms, crowds, and data feeds on his discreet wristcom. He anticipated her needs with an almost annoying prescience. A door opened before she reached it, a data slate handed to her just as she thought to ask for it. He was efficient, professional, and utterly infuriating. At a tedious art exhibition, hosted by a rival corporation, Alara decided to test him. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments and engaging in hollow chatter, all the while deliberately slipping into thicker and thicker groups of people, trying to lose him. Each time she glanced back, he was there, a few paces behind, his gaze never resting on her for too long but always aware. He didn't push through the crowd. He simply flowed with it, a quiet current in a noisy river. Frustrated, she finally turned on him in a relatively quiet corner near a holographic sculpture. "Must you hover? I'm perfectly safe here. These are the galaxy's elite, not common thugs. The most dangerous threats often wear the finest clothes, Miss Venetrix," he said, his eyes scanning a group of executives laughing loudly by the champagne fountain. "You're paranoid," she scoffed. "I'm thorough," he corrected gently. Later that evening, returning to her penthouse, she found herself unable to sleep. She paced her chambers, the vastness of her home feeling more like a gilded prison than ever. She wandered out onto the main floor, the lights dimmed to a soft glow. Kellen was sitting in an armchair in the living area, not staring into space, but reading from a light slate, his profile softened in the low light. He looked up as she entered. "Is everything all right, Miss Venatrix? I live in a fortress with a full security team, and I have a bodyguard who looks like he should be modeling for academy recruitment posters. Everything is just perfect," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She walked to the synth bar and poured herself a glass of water. "What are you reading?" He tilted the slate. "A history of pre-Starfall Terra. The migration periods." Alara blinked, surprised. It wasn't the latest thriller or a tactical manual. It was academic. "Why? Context," he said simply. "To understand where we are, it sometimes helps to understand where we began." She stared at him for a long moment, seeing past the suit and the job title for the first time. There was a depth in his calm eyes that she hadn't noticed before, an intelligence that wasn't just about threat assessment. She felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, not pity, not annoyance, but a spark of genuine curiosity. "Well," she said, turning to go back to her room, "don't stay up too late reading. I'd hate for you to be too tired to look adorable tomorrow." She left before he could reply, but as she closed her door, she realized the barb had felt hollow, even to her. The label Adorable Bodyguard suddenly didn't seem to fit the quiet man with the history book. For the first time, she wondered if she was the one who had been doing the underestimating. The Venatrix annual gala was the social event of the Cirrus Prime season, a dazzling spectacle of wealth and power where business empires were subtly forged, and broken over glasses of effervescent star wine and canapes. Alara, draped in a gown woven from shimmering twilight fabric, was the undisputed centerpiece, moving through the throng with a polished, practiced smile. Kellen was a shadow at her periphery, his dark suit blending into the opulent backdrop. "You're looming again," she murmured to him as she accepted a compliment from a gem-mining magnate. "My apologies, Miss Venatrix." His voice was a low hum, barely audible over the string quartet. "I'll try to loom less conspicuously." Despite her earlier criticisms, Alara had to admit his presence was different tonight. It wasn't the intimidating bulk of Bronson. It was a constant, calm pressure, a gravitational field of awareness. He never obstructed her view or her conversations, but she noticed his eyes were never still. They tracked the movement of servers, noted the slight stiffening of a corporate rival's posture, and lingered for a fraction of a second too long on a man across the room, who was adjusting his cufflink with repetitive, nervous energy. The man was Jax Soren, heir to a rival conglomerate. Handsome, charming, and notoriously ruthless. He was making his way toward her with a predator's smile. "Speak of the devil," Alara whispered, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Be careful." Kellen's voice was even lower now, a private thread of sound meant only for her. "His financials are more strained than he's letting on." Desperation makes for poor manners. Before she could process how he knew that, Jax was upon them, taking her hand and brushing his lips against her knuckles. "Alara, you are a vision, as always. A supernova in a room full of dim stars." "Jax, always so dramatic." She retrieved her hand smoothly. "Enjoying the party?" "Infinitely more now," he said, his eyes flicking over her shoulder to Kellen. "And who's this?" "I don't believe we've met." "Noob assistant." "This is Kellen, my head of personal security," Alara said, a thread of defiance in her voice. Jax's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Is that so? He seems a bit slight for the role. I hope he's more capable than he looks." He gave Kellen a condescending once-over. "No offense, of course, none taken, Mr. Soren," Kellen replied, his tone utterly neutral. His gaze, however, remained fixed on Jax's hands. "Your signet ring is quite unique. A family heirloom?" Jax instinctively closed his hand, hiding the ring. "Something like that. Now, Alara, might I steal you for a moment? There's a proposal for a joint venture on the Alpha Cygni shipping lanes I'd love to discuss." As Jax led her away, Alara felt a strange sense of unease, a tugging sensation telling her to look back at Kellen. She didn't. She fell into the familiar rhythm of corporate banter, but her focus was split. She watched Jax's hands as he gestured, noticing the heavy, ornate signet ring. Kellen had noticed it, too. Why? 15 minutes into their conversation, a server approached with a tray of drinks. Jax smoothly took 2 flutes of star wine, handing one to Alara. "A toast," he said, his eyes glinting. "To new partnerships." As Alara raised the glass to her lips, a figure moved beside her with startling speed. It was Kellen. He didn't grab her arm or make a scene. He simply stumbled, as if jostled by the crowd, his elbow knocking the flute from her hand. The crystal glass shattered on the marble floor, the pale pink liquid spreading like a stain. A hushed silence fell around them. Clumsy oath. Jax snapped, his face flushing with genuine anger. "Look what you've done." "My most profound apologies, Miss Venatrix," Kellen said, his voice laced with contrition. But his eyes were locked on Jax, sharp and hard as diamond. "It was an accident. Allow me to fetch you another." He gestured to another server. "From a fresh bottle, please, sealed, and a glass from the clean stock." The specific instructions hung in the air. Jax's expression shifted from anger to a cold, calculating mask. The moment stretched, taut and silent. "Of course," Jax said, his voice tight. "We must be careful about contamination." The new drink arrived. Kellen took it from the server, his movements deliberate. He didn't hand it to Alara. He simply held it. "Perhaps, Soren, you would care to join the toast. We can have a fresh glass brought for you as well." Jax's smile was brittle. "I've suddenly lost my thirst. If you'll excuse me." He turned and melted into the crowd, his retreat swift and final. Alara stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The nervous adjustment of the cufflink a signal. The ring perhaps a dispenser. The insistence on the toast. The specific drink from that specific server. It hadn't been an accident. She turned to Kellen. The quiet, adorable man was gone. In his place stood a person of razor-sharp perception and fearless action. He had seen the threat no one else had, a threat hidden not in shadows, but in plain sight amidst the glitter and gold. "My office," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Now, in the soundproofed silence of her study, she faced him. The gala's music was a distant, mocking hum. It was poisoned, she stated. Not asked, a neuroinhibitor. He confirmed. His calm demeanor returned. Fast-acting, untraceable. It would have left you suggestible, compliant, easy to manipulate into signing away your shipping lanes or anything else he wanted. And you knew. How's the server's biometrics were spiking with stress hormones. Jax's micro-expressions when he looked at you were not of attraction, but of anticipation. And the ring. It's a known design for single-use dispensers. The pieces didn't fit the picture of a simple social engagement. Alara sank into a chair, the weight of her gown suddenly feeling like a lead blanket. She had been a prize to be won, an obstacle to be chemically removed, and the only person who had seen it was the man she had mocked and belittled. "You saved me," she said, the words feeling inadequate, not just from embarrassment, but from being erased. "It's my job, Miss Venatrix," he replied. But the old mantra now sounded different. It wasn't a bland deflection. It was a profound and solemn promise he had kept. She looked at him, truly looked at him. The pleasant features held a quiet strength. The calm eyes held galaxies of perception. The facade of the unassuming bodyguard had unraveled, and what was left was someone far more compelling. "My name is Alara," she said softly, the formality feeling absurd now. "When we're alone, you can call me Alara." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "As you wish." Alara, in that moment, the professional boundary, so carefully constructed, developed a hairline crack, and through it, a new, dangerous, and thrilling connection began to bloom. The days following the gala were different. The air in the stellar spire, once filled with Alara's pointed barbs and Kellen's silent tolerance, now held a new, unspoken tension. It was not the tension of threat, but of two people reassessing each other. Alara found her eyes drawn to him not with criticism, but with a gnawing curiosity. She watched the way he observed the world, a quiet intelligence constantly at work behind those calm hazel eyes. The gilded cage of her life felt more oppressive than ever. The attempted poisoning hadn't been a crude attack from the outside. It was a betrayal from within her own world, a world of polished smiles and hidden knives. The one person who felt real was the man paid to stand in her shadow. One evening, unable to bear the weight of the silence in her penthouse, she found him on the terrace, looking out over the neon-drenched cityscape that stretched to the horizon. "Can't sleep?" he asked, not turning round. His awareness of her presence was uncanny. "It feels like the walls are watching me," she admitted, joining him at the railing. The wind played with the loose strands of her hair. "All my life, I've been taught that this," she gestured to the sprawling city, "the symbol of her family's power, is everything. That I am the heir, the figurehead, the prize to be protected and married off for corporate advantage." She expected a polite, professional deflection. Instead, he was silent, listening. It was a silence that invited confession. "Jax wasn't an anomaly," she continued, her voice dropping. "He's the rule. Everyone wants a piece of the Venetrix empire, and I'm the key. Sometimes I feel like I'm not a person at all, but a vessel for wealth and a name. A prisoner in a tower made of credits and expectations." She risked a glance at him. He was looking at her, his expression unreadable but intensely focused. "Why do you do this?" she asked, turning the tables. "A man who reads history of Prestarfal Terra. You could be anything. A scholar, a strategist. Why stand silently in stuffy rooms, babysitting a spoiled heiress?" He didn't answer immediately, his gaze returning to the city lights. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, stripped of its professional veneer. "I grew up in a place where strength was the only currency that mattered. It was loud and brutal and simple. You fought for what was yours. I learned to be quiet, to watch, to understand the patterns of violence before they erupted. It was the only way to survive." He paused, and the weight of his past hung between them. "I left that behind, but the skills remained. This job, it's not about babysitting. It's about reading the patterns in a different kind of jungle. The violence here is quieter, but the stakes are just as high. Protecting someone from that, it feels like a better use of my skills than causing the violence myself." His words settled over her, recontextualizing everything. His calm wasn't a lack of passion. It was a hard-won peace. His observation wasn't just a job. It was the core of who he was. He wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a refugee from a world of chaos, now acting as a sentinel in her world of gilded deceit. "You see me," she whispered, the realization striking her with the force of a physical blow. "Not the heiress, not the prize. You see the patterns. You see me." He finally turned to face her fully, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "It's my job to see what others miss," he said, but the words now carried a deeper, more personal meaning. In that moment, the last of her defenses crumbled. The professional boundary shattered completely. She wasn't looking at her employee. She was looking at Kellen, the man. And he wasn't looking at his charge. He was looking at Alara, the woman, trapped and lonely. The space between them, once a chasm of status and misunderstanding, now felt like a magnetic field, pulling them together. Neither of them moved, but something fundamental had shifted. The trust she had placed in him to protect her body was now extending to her heart, and in the quiet understanding of his gaze, she knew he felt it. The arrival of Lord Valerius, a suitor from an old-world aristocratic family with vast mineral holdings, was met with a fresh wave of dread by Alara. He was everything Jax was not, impeccably polite, cultured, and his courtship was a slow, traditional dance. Yet, the memory of the gala made every suitor a potential threat. "He seems genuine," she confessed to Kellen as they prepared for a private dinner at Valerius's city estate. "Genuine is the easiest mask to wear," Kellen replied, his eyes scanning the security feed of the estate's grounds. "His finances are stable, his record clean, but his head of security, a man named Roland, has ties to corporate Black Ops units that were disbanded for aggressive negotiation tactics." Alara felt a chill. "So we go in carefully. We always go in carefully," he said, offering her the ghost of a reassuring smile. The dinner was a stifling affair. Valerius was charming, discussing art and music with a knowledge that was both deep and disarming. He never once mentioned business, but Alara felt Kellen's heightened alertness like a constant low hum. He stood against the wall, a silent sentinel. But his eyes missed nothing: the precise timing of the servers, the slight shift in Valerius's posture when a specific dessert wine was presented. "A rare vintage from my family's vineyards on Terra Nova," Valerius said, pouring a glass of deep amber liquid for Alara. "I've been saving it for a special occasion. Meeting you certainly qualifies." As Alara reached for the glass, Kellen moved. It wasn't the controlled stumble of the gala. This was a direct, purposeful stride. He stepped between Alara and the table, his hand covering the top of her glass. "With all due respect, Lord Valerius," Kellen's voice was like ice, "I must insist on a preliminary scan. Standard protocol for all consumables not prepared in Miss Venetrix's own kitchens." Valerius's smile tightened. "This is an insult to my house's honor." "I would never." "It's not your honor I'm concerned with," Kellen interrupted, his gaze unwavering. He produced a small, multispectral scanner from his pocket and passed it over the glass. A soft, persistent beep broke the tense silence. The scanner's screen flashed red, indicating a complex synthetic toxin, odorless and colorless. Valerius's face paled, then twisted in fury, not at being caught, but at the failure. "Roland," he barked. The large security chief drew a pulse pistol from beneath his jacket, but Kellen was faster. In one fluid motion, he swept Alara's legs out from under her, guiding her safely to the floor behind the solid oak table as a plasma bolt seared the air. Where her head had been, he drew his own weapon, a compact, vicious-looking thing, and fired twice. The first shot disintegrated Roland's pistol. The second hit him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Kellen was on his feet, his weapon now aimed at Valerius, who stood frozen. "The game is over," Kellen said, his voice dangerously calm. "Your honorable courtship was just a quieter way to acquire a fortune. You're not the first to try, and you won't be the last. But you are the last who will get this close." He didn't wait for a reply. He grabbed Alara's hand, pulling her to her feet. "We're leaving. Now." They ran, not back to the gilded cage of the stellar spire, but into the neon-soaked underbelly of the city. Two fugitives with only each other to trust. They found refuge in a forgotten sector of the city, in a small, self-contained hab unit that Kellen maintained for emergencies. The air was recycled, the view a dingy alley, but it was the first place Alara had felt truly safe in years. The facade of the heiress was gone, leaving behind a tired, frightened, but determined woman. For 2 days, they existed in a strange, intimate limbo. Kellen tended to a minor burn on her arm from a stray spark during their escape. She watched him strategize their next move, his mind a brilliant, tactical engine. The pretense was gone. They were just Kellen and Alara, on the second night, sitting on the worn synth leather couch. She broke the silence. "They'll never stop. Jax, Valerius. There will always be another. My name is a target. We can disappear," he said, his voice soft. "I know how. New identities, a fringe colony far from corporate space. A simple life, a life with you?" she asked, her heart hammering. He finally looked away from the security feeds he was monitoring and met her gaze. The professional mask was gone, and in its place was a raw, vulnerable hope she had never seen before. "Only if that's the life you want." She moved then, closing the small space between them. She cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the line of his jaw. He was still, his breath catching. "All my life," she whispered, "people have seen my name, my wealth, my face. They called you the Adorable Bodyguard. They said you were too tiny, too insignificant to protect me. But you were the only one strong enough to see me. Not the heiress. Just me." She leaned forward, her lips meeting his. It was not a desperate kiss born of fear, but a slow, deliberate promise, a choice. When they parted, his arms were around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the galaxy. "I don't want a bodyguard," Alara said, her forehead resting against his. "And I don't want to be an heiress. I just want to be the woman you chose to protect because you care about her. I want to be the woman who chooses you, a genuine." Breathtaking smile finally broke through his calm reserve. "Then that's who we'll be." The next morning, they left the hab unit. They didn't take a corporate shuttle or access any of her accounts. They walked into the bustling spaceport, to anonymous figures among thousands. Kellen used a hidden cache of credits to secure passage on a freighter bound for the Outer Rim. A ship called the Starlight Drifter. As the freighter broke atmo, leaving Cirrus Prime behind as a glittering jewel in the blackness. Alara looked at the man beside her. He wasn't her bodyguard anymore. He was Kellen, the man who loved her. And she was no longer Alara Venatrix, the heiress. She was simply Alara, the woman who was finally, truly free, hand in hand with the man who had shown her that the strongest fortress was not made of walls, but of trust, and that the most powerful choice was not to have everything, but to have the one thing that mattered.